There's a reason I make these videos and post them on YouTube. They're instructional for anybody and everybody, but primarily for the owner of the carburetors. We mount the carburetors on our test engine and run the carburetors and demonstrate how well they work, and try to educate people as to their function and adjustment. These are carburetors that came back to me. I must confess, the first set that has come back to me in, trying to think, maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 years. So this was quite a shock for these to come back for poor running. So I'm going to go over them, instructional in terms of things to look for all the Solex carburetors on 190 SLs, and then specifically to the people responsible for these carburetors. One of the first things I noticed was there used to be ball studs right here so that you could attach the linkage. I don't know what happened to what kind of linkage these guys are running, but these ball studs are gone, so I don't know how you hook up your linkage. Another thing I've noticed was, well, a little brutal the way the ball studs were removed, but this lock tab here has been bent over or undone, so the lever could be removed and the lock tab not been replaced. Another thing I noticed was this bracket here is really bent. Don't know what that's about. And you compare that with this other bracket, and you can see how it's supposed to be. Yes, this little guy right here. This ordinarily is a screw with a jam nut, and this is your choke. This is the adjustment for the choke to operate and open the linkage, the carburetor linkage, throttle linkage, so that when you choke the vehicle, you pull down on the choke right here, you're supposed to raise this. You know, they didn't even have the spring on here, so I got to put a new spring on here. But anyway, what's supposed to happen is, as you open the choke, this lever moves, and in turn moves this lever, which is your throttle linkage. So at the same time you're choking the carburetor, you're actually opening the throttle. And this screw right here is supposed to be set with a clearance of 15 thousandths. See if I can get this focus here. Okay, so they got that part correct. Now what's interesting is that this is supposed to have a jam nut here, so once you set it, it stays set. This little screw is just real easy to move, so this thing is not going to stay in position. So that means you're going to either have too much choke or not enough choke on your throttle linkage. So we will fix that. Excuse my camera work. Now then, what the carburetor came in for in the first place was incredibly poor running, and that had to do with the fact that the hole for the idle mixture screw was just decimated. I don't know if you can see it or not here, but right on the tip right here, see, this is brass, but right here you got a little silver part. See if you can see it even better over here with some light on the subject. I don't think that's any better. Anyway, take my word for it. There's a little bitty ring of silver right there, and that's the remains of somebody screwing down the idle mixture screw so hard that it blew a hole right through the inside of the throw of the carburetor. Now we've since repaired the hole, and That's this hole right here. We've since repaired it. But the problem remains that somebody screwed down so hard on this idle mixture screw that it blew a massive hole right through the carburetor body. Now then, these things are very delicate. First of all, while they do have a slot on, that's for convenience, but you notice they're knurled. That means that you should be able to grab these with your fingers and move them around and set them into position. So you do not need a screwdriver. Now the problem that the mistake that people make is that they will take these screws and they think that it's a good idea to screw it in so tight with a screwdriver that you actually end up deforming the metal right here. You may not be able to see that, but it's starting to pooch out. This has been screwed down so tight that you actually are using brass to deform the pot metal. I don't know what kind of pressure it takes to do that, but it's just not necessary. Screwing this down tight does not benefit you. It does not do anything. It does not set the starting point. It does not give you a reference. It does not give you a baseline. It does no good to screw this thing down so tight with a screwdriver that you need a screwdriver to back it out. All you have is a spring right here to keep the idle mixture screw in position, and then after that, you should be able to do it with your fingertips. That right there is as tight as it needs to go for starting your initial adjustment on the carburetors. And what that is you screw it down until it just touches, and you back this thing out 1.5 turns or 3/2 turns, and that's your initial adjustment. Screwing this poor little brass screw down so tight that it deforms the pot metal, or in this case blows a hole through the pot metal, benefits nobody and just ends up ruining things. So we have repaired that hole, and that hole is a very precisely drilled hole. I think it's 0.55 millimeters. I'm sorry. I think it's 55 thousandths diameter. Anyway, the important thing is if you take your idle mixture screw and screw it down so tight that you start to deform that hole, then you're going to affect your ability to adjust your carburetor in your idle mixture screw adjustment. Alright, now then, part of the problem that we're running into is people don't understand this screw right here and this assembly in terms of what it does and how to adjust it. Alright, that's this screw right here. This long one right here goes against this screw right here, that pin rather, and what you're doing is all two barrels are open right now because you've been racing down the road, and now you shut off, you back off on the throttle, and as you back off on the throttle, everything closes down, and this screw right here acts on the pin and closes down the second barrel. Now then, that's all well and good, assuming that this is adjusted correctly. But this is not adjusted correctly. With this screw, with the second barrel closed, I mean, have a hard time doing this. Okay, with the second barrel closed, this one closed, notice you have no contact between the idle adjustment screw and the lever. Okay, this screw is down so tight that it's artificially opening the throttle. That's not the way it's supposed to be done. So this, in addition to having a big hole in the throat, this carburetor was misadjusted to where it's never going to idle properly. The second carburetor that came with it is closer to being correct, but it is still not correct itself. Alright, now notice we've got the second barrel is closed, and we have contact between our lever and our adjustment screw. Now if we go over here and hold the first barrel closed, and you come in here and you move the counterweight. Alright, notice you have some free play. That's actually too much free play. This screw needs to be adjusted down further. But at least you have some free play, so that means that the second barrel in this screw is not artificially keeping the first barrel open. These are all interrelated, so as you adjust your idle here, you have to make sure that you have proper clearance here. So once you've got your what you're going to do is for your initial settings, you will unscrew this jam nut. Okay, unscrew the jam nut. Unscrew this so you have plenty of clearance, so that there's nothing impinging on the two barrels. Make sure the second barrel is closed. You then come over here. You get your. In fact, I'm going to back this one off. And you make sure everything closes. And at that point, you then come over here and you screw down to where you make contact. Making contact, and then you go 1.5 turns. 1, 2, okay. 1.5 turns. That gives you your initial setting for your initial idle. And so with 1.5 turns backed out on the idle mixture screw, 1.5 down on the idle setting screw, that'll give you your ability to run the carburetors till the engine warms up and you do your fine tuning. Alright, and then once you've done all your fine tuning and your adjustment here and you're all set with your idle, you then come in here and do your final screw down on this guy right here until you get just the teeniest amount of movement. Because what this is designed to do is obviously all two barrels are open. You then close the throttle, and the little screw gets on that pin and closes everything, and then the very last bit of closing is done by the vacuum of the engine, and it sucks that butterfly down. You want to make sure you have just the teeniest amount of movement. Oh, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Trying to think what else to discuss here. All right. I guess the rest would be just putting back on the reassembling everything, putting on the test engine, and dialing them in. I'm sure that there's nothing else. Well, we'll find out what else is wrong once we get them on there. I'll get this bracket straightened out or at a 90-degree angle. You always check to make sure your pre-atomizers are tight. By just sticking your finger in there and feeling of them. That's fine. Make sure we still have good choke action. Alright. Okay, I hope this helped people a little bit. If you have any questions, certainly ask. I'd rather people ask questions than to do things that... I was going to mention the broken carburetor right here. What happens is when the rear motor mounts collapse, this is a perfect example. When the rear motor mounts collapse, the air log will actually sit on the firewall at about this point right here. And you can tell if your rear motor mounts are collapsed because if you can't put your fingers between the air log and the firewall of the car, then your motor mounts have collapsed. And what that means is that your motor mounts down here are no longer doing the job of suspending the engine. The engine is being suspended by the airlog, which in turn is attached to the carburetors, and you've got about 400 or 500 pounds of weight hanging off of the flanges of the carburetors, and you hit a good bump and boom, your carburetor flange snaps off. So always check to make sure you've got good motor mounts, and if need be, put shims between the motor mount bracket and the motor mount itself, flat washers, to help shim it up and keep the airlog away from the firewall. Happy motoring!